Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some big updates here today on the Israel-Iran situation. We are still waiting for the United States move on whether or not they will involve themselves in this potential conflict. Will diplomacy win out? There's been some talks, some rumors of maybe some meetings today or tomorrow to discuss some type of, in what Trump's words would be, a peace deal slash Iran giving up and unconditional surrender is what Trump says, which is something that at this point you would figure has an extremely low chance of happening. But Trump said, well, maybe, and this was reported yesterday, maybe if Iran got rid of their nuclear program, he's still waiting in terms of potentially doing this strike. Yesterday at around 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, it was reported by the Wall Street Journal that Trump had privately approved the attack plans for Iran, but has withheld final order. So they've prepped Trump. It was reported yesterday Trump met the man that was going to lead this potential order in terms of likely striking Fordo, the main enrichment facility that's located in the side of a mountain that would require significant uh, weapons and heavy armed bombs that would be the B-2 bombers to penetrate the mountain. And because apparently Fordo is very, very deep, it's got multiple levels, it goes down several hundred feet. And so they would need the B2s for that. And that, but then we start talking about, well, how does that affect the Iraq bases? Because there's been reports that, I mean, it's come out, Iran said, we are on the defensive, we are reactionary. If the U.S. is involved, we will be striking bases. They have said that, and so that's been confirmed. There was also talks of Trump saying, well, maybe Iran wants to meet at the White House, and that's something that I'm thinking about, although he's been very nonchalant and negative towards the idea of negotiations, at least publicly. We don't know if that's maybe just a public persona he's giving off, or if he really is done. I mean, we did have the 60 days pass. He wanted zero enrichment. This goes back to 2018 when he originally ripped up the Obama deal. He said it's too risky. They cannot have any enrichment, whether it's 3.7, whether it's 2%, even with Iran. After the preemptive strikes from Israel said, we're willing to be flexible on the uranium enrichment, maybe bring it down to what number, I don't know. They didn't say an exact number, but possibly 2%, 2.5%, some type of civilian use. But Trump is saying, we want no enrichment because we think you guys are lying and the numbers that you're reporting are not accurate. And at this point, and listen, this is where the skepticism comes in, because Trump has done a full 180, it feels like, on this topic. And I know the administration, if you guys saw, there was something that leaked out, and it was like Republican talking points for, influencers on how to handle this, because this is kind of splitting up the Republican Party to a degree, or at least the conservative online space in terms of striking Iran. I do think there's a lot of overreaction. Everyone says, "Oh, it's going to be World War III." Well, no, there's a middle avenue, and we've talked about this, in between a full-fledged, long, wide-scale war like Iraq, something like Afghanistan, where you're dealing with troops where it's years and years and years and it's a total mess and it's a money drain, versus what we think Trump potentially is going to do, which would be joint strikes where the U.S. gets in, gets out, although that is very complicated because Iran is going to respond. They will strike U.S. bases. And what does Trump do after that? That's the real question. And also, we know Israel desperately wants regime change. And now you've got some Republican senators coming out saying we need regime change. So they're changing their rhetoric to where, is that something that Trump would do? I'd be interested if they asked Trump about regime change, what his response would be. I'm shocked no one within the media has. To me, that's the number one question. And maybe he wouldn't say anything. He's been coy, and he should be to the public. Unless you want to mislead people, you can kind of say certain things that aren't true and create a narrative to be able to deceive. But overall, I would say, well, where is Trump at in terms of regime change? In the past, he's been relatively against it, but Israel desperately wants it. You've got Netanyahu saying that him and Trump are talking daily. Trump's been a great help to Netanyahu in Israel. Trump publicly praising Netanyahu yesterday, saying he was being untreated. He was being treated unfairly by Israel because he is unliked or not very liked in Israel. So this Netanyahu, and it's been reported that Israel wants to allow Trump to make the decision by himself because they don't want to view it as us pressuring him. Well, you've already pressured him. You preemptively struck Iran and then acted like it was some coordinated plan between Trump and Netanyahu, which nobody really believed because it seemed like Trump was changing it, at least this term, to where he was being a little bit more stern on Israel. But then suddenly within the past week, ever since these strikes, it's been a 180. And now it's all this support for Israel. Now, oh, for sure, it's a nuclear bomb. They're developing it. They've got it. You see the Tucker Carlson interview with Ted Cruz. It's the fear-mongering, and this is how these Middle Eastern wars happen, the fear-mongering to drag the United States into it. Now, the thing that you can argue against is, well, these are just certain strikes. There's no troop deployments. This is going to be quick. We really don't know. I mean, this is what people have to understand when you're talking about when people say, oh, it's going to be 2 weeks, or it's going to be a month, or it's going to be this, it's going to be that. Remember when they said that Russia would take Kiev in, 2 weeks? Remember when they said they'd split Ukraine in half in a month? People have no clue when it comes to predictions on this. There's just too many variables in terms of war. It's just the reality. Now, sure, you can kind of guesstimate that the United States eventually would come out on top with Israel against Iran, but at what cost and how long does it take? And what does it involve in terms of U.S. support? That's the real question. That's why they do these opinion polls. And it says, well, do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Well, we want as little adversaries as possible to have a nuclear weapon. Nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And it comes back 80-20 or whatever. Nobody wants. But the question is, what does the United States have to expend to make sure that doesn't happen? And is this really a thing that we need to be worried about? Because Trump's own intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, came out in March and said they are not actively pursuing. Yes, they have higher uranium enrichment. Now that could be an oxymoron to some people, to where it's like, well, if you're enriching to 60%, that is actively pursuing, you could argue. But that intelligence report said they're not actively trying to create a nuclear weapon. And then Trump came out 2 days ago and said, well, Israel said they are, so I choose to believe them over Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, that's paraphrasing, but that's basically what it was. So Americans have seen this before. We've seen a similar script. Yes, you could say there's different variables. Yes, you could say this is going to be something that could be quicker, unlike, and Trump knows that it has to be quicker. He said in a statement yesterday that he wants it to happen quickly. And if he has to, if they have to strike, they've got to do what they got to do. So he said sometimes it has to happen if negotiations fail. They're still kind of trying. We know there were reports that there were going to be some form of meetings between Iran diplomats and the envoy. So we'll have to see. But Trump comes out apparently, and Trump now is saying, you can see the Wall Street Journal has no idea what my thoughts are concerning Iran. So he wasn't very happy. That honestly leads me to believe that that's probably true. I'm just being honest. If Trump comes out and says that, it's probably true that because think about it, if he met with the man that was going to be leading these strikes yesterday, I would imagine he's having these situation room meetings every single day. It's being reported they're deciding one way or another. And it's been like this for 2.5, 3 days now, ever since he left the G7. So I would imagine they're probably right. And I would say the Wall Street Journal has gotten a lot wrong recently. And there's a lot of these reports that come out. Now there's another report. Trump's going to strike on the weekend. He's going to strike Iran on the weekend. But they're saying, and who knows, but they're saying it's going to be 4-0. That's going to be the U.S. strike, because that would be the most realistic option for the United States in terms of Israel needing the U.S. because they do not have the ability. And when you're talking about the War Powers Act and the need, they need Congress. There are workarounds, and I'm guessing Trump would probably not honor that. It becomes a gray area in terms of this being war or not. I do think it is war. Now, how long would this last? We don't know. But there is a growing sentiment within Congress. There's congressmen that are saying, no, we shouldn't do this. But you also have senators and Republican governors saying that yes, we should support Israel, and we know that there is a major lobbying effort that is extremely pro-Israel on that front. So the developments right now are, I think at this point, it's just we're seeing, can there potentially be some diplomacy? We've looked at Trump and studied it in the past few days. It seems like Trump has not been himself. whether this situation is weighing on him, the potential use of strikes aggressively in an offensive manner, or there's something else at play here in terms of Trump possibly being controlled. It does seem like Trump at this point has had a little bit more of a, he's been in a bad mood, and he's been more depressed recently. You can kind of tell. And so, listen, we'll see what ends up happening with this situation, but I think there might still be one last shot for some diplomacy, although it seems increasingly unlikely. It's seemed unlikely for about 2 days now, really ever since the Israel strikes. Because why would Iran negotiate? Why would Iran give up their potential, any of the, their right to potentially make a nuclear bomb now that Israel has struck them? Israel obviously wants a regime change, and Iran is not in a great spot right now. Now, the thing is, this is what people have to understand. There's no way to scale where Iran is in terms of their military health right now. Now, you could say it's in a bad spot, but what does that mean? It's a big country, 90 million people. Some type of regime change is, my guess is, the hope from Israel is that the United States joins. They create enough of a ruckus to allow the citizens that don't like the current regime that's been in power for a while to be overthrown. And the citizens then lead some type of revolution to overthrow the current regime. That's what it would have to be. Because what else what would you be implying? Some type of to me, either way, even if even if the regime gets disabled, it's such a mess. Regime changes are such a mess. And it would probably involve more U.S. money in making that happen. So I don't know. The number one thing is now, does Trump, because it seems like there's going to be a strike. Now maybe they'll still talk. I don't know. But if there's a strike, how far does Trump take it? The U.S. has to be ready. They're going to be struck back from Iran at the Iraq bases. And then what is the next step after that for Trump and for this potential war? Because that's really what we have to be thinking about. And so I would imagine that this is probably legitimate in terms of Trump approving the way in which the attack would commence. He just hasn't given the final sign off on it. And there's other reports saying it's going to happen tonight. There's reports saying it's going to happen tomorrow. There's a lot of false information going around. Would Iran agree to 0% enrichment? I don't know why they would agree to that after getting struck preemptively by Israel, unless their regime is extremely worried that Israel aggressively pushing for this regime change and already taking out several of their officials with precision strikes, and several other nuclear scientists, civilian scientists with strikes. Now there's talk of the regime fleeing to Oman. And so there's got to be a lot of paranoia. So if they're that worried about their safety, maybe they could say, well, let's not get the U.S. involved. Let's do some type of deal. But what is the deal? The deal is not going to be good for Iran at all. There's no way. The U.S. would exude maximum leverage and maximum pressure to get zero enrichment. And the only thing that Iran could potentially get from this, and the United States would be obliging, would be some type of sanction relief. I would imagine that would be pretty much it after those Israeli strikes. But Israel and Iran are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Trump is still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Maybe some type of ceasefire. Yesterday he said, no, I don't want a ceasefire. I mean, he's saying all this different stuff publicly, but behind closed doors, it's something different. And you just have to, Trump is saying that he supports Netanyahu. He supports these strikes by Israel. And Israel is just waiting for Trump to join in, it seems like. And so if the United States, whenever they decide to do that, obviously it's going to be a huge thing if the U.S. decides to strike Fordo, and the type of damage that causes and the cascade effect. And where does that leave Russia and China in relation to supporting Iran? You had Russia potentially say they were trying to set up some type of defense that Iran declined because they don't want a bloc alliance. So we'll have to see. We've been analyzing it, and at some point, whether it's diplomacy, which is what I hope, I would love to see diplomacy, but to me, there's just, it's not compatible with the current situation. The U.S. would demand too much. Iran would not want to give up much because they just got struck, and I'm sure they're very wary anyways. Trump destroying the original deal back in 2018, saying, I mean, he said that 3% enrichment is too much. That's why the deal got ripped up. And this is where we're at now. Now, you could say, well, also the deal had sunset clauses. And so, what's the point of it if it's just going to expire in 10 years, anyways? And do you really trust Iran? They're probably enriching behind your back. But I mean, at this point, we're talking about these countries 7, 8, 9,000 miles away. Whether they're enriching behind our back is not our problem. That would be Israel's problem. That's not the United States problem. Iran, and then the other stuff is now the fear mongering, the shameless fear mongering about Iran creating a nuclear weapon, and then that nuclear weapon having the capability. I mean, look at all the launches that North Korea does that fail badly. You think if Iran created a nuclear weapon, they would just automatically be able to reach the United States, let alone they would try? Yeah, that makes sense for Iran, a country that's 8,000 miles away, would say, you know what, let's target the United States, the strongest, most powerful military in the world. Let's go ahead and pick a fight with them. That would make a lot of sense. Obviously, it's just pathetic fear-mongering. So, I mean, it is what it is, but guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.